Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. Welcome to my channel. My name is Samuel and I want to make self-growth normal. If you want to make self-growth normal, because I don't want to do it alone, and who doesn't want to make self-growth normal, then make sure to smash that like button. You guys know that Quest bars, right? The protein bars? The founder of that company, Tom Bilyeu, he has this online show thing called Impact Theory. And to my knowledge, watching Impact Theory is like watching Oprah on steroids. But the most popular episode, if not one of them, is the episode with David Goggins, the author of this book. And that's all I've seen of him. But based on just that, I think what separates him from other people you may associate with him with, like Trent Shelton or Gary Vaynerchuk or maybe Jocko Willink, is that David Goggins did not exactly strike me as some sort of a more intellectual type. And by that I don't mean like I think he's dumb or anything of the like. He's a very smart guy. I mean, he doesn't really strike me as the type of guy to spend as much of his time like particularly reading or studying all that much. He does talk a little bit about stuff that he read throughout the book, but more than anything, working out until far beyond the point at which any even irrationally disciplined human being would snap like a twig in order to save him or herself from death. And yet, he says that writing this book was, mentally speaking, one of the hardest things he's ever done. So if you know about his history, it makes a lot of sense to say that this is probably a very heavy statement. But I can believe it after listening to the book. And this project, the audio version at least, turned into a sort of audiobook slash podcast slash radio show between himself and I believe his ghostwriter, who did a really good job. The beginning of the book, called I Should Have Been a Statistic, is such a stunning example of how not to be a father. It reminded me a tad of the guy in Born a Crime by Trevor Noah. His mom, the guy she was with toward the end of that book. But this probably sounded, I don't know, something about this sounded a lot worse and more traumatic. Again, maybe it's just the ghostwriter. Maybe that made it scarier or something, because he's a ghostwriter, I don't know. In The Truth Hurts, he talks about something he likes to call the accountability mirror, which I found interesting. It's where you write down, your insecurities on Post-it notes, like hardcore ones, like, Robert, you're fat! You're a loser, Robert, you're fat! You weigh 364 pounds! And then under that it says, like, lose 2 pounds by the end of the week! And then you find out how to lose 2 pounds by the end of the week and do it. You're way more likely to do this than if you just look in the mirror every day and just tell yourself that as if there's nothing you can do about it. So the thing about this that works is that by doing it, you are actually kind of developing thick skin without really the help of others. And I can see how this would sound counterintuitive. Like, insult yourself and look at the insult every day. But in some ways, by creating urgency, you're actually kind of selling yourself on losing weight by holding yourself accountable, looking right at yourself and facing your insecurities. But you also remind yourself at the same time, like, you can do this. And until you do it, you will stay fat, Robert, and maybe get worse. No offense to any fat person named Robert who's watching this video. To sort of obliterate anything, and by anything, I literally mean anything. Any amount or difficulty level in front of you, any work, any project, any list of prospects or numbers you gotta call, any list of books to read, any opponent or team or ball or punching bag or track in your way. What helps me to do that, and I really think something David Goggins taught himself, I don't know how or where I learned it, maybe it started, it all started 8 years ago when I started taking Adderall, probably. What I like to do, at least, is I like to treat those obstacles like just another simple step I take on the way to what I want. Some of the stories he tells, like with Hell Week with the Navy, obviously it's hellish, but it's weird. He had this stuff where he like trolled the guards or the officers or whatever and whatnot who were yelling at him and telling him to do better by exceeding them. And there were other people in Hell Week who were behind him who were exceeding as well because they were watching him and they were doing what he was doing because it was not just very unique, but it was also fun and it was getting results. And what I love is when he talks about taking souls. Like, I think this is some degree of what his co-author or ghostwriter called a power dynamic. I forget the guy's name. I looked it up, I couldn't even find it. It's where someone who doubts you or says you can't do this much or you can't make this much. You can't do this many push-ups or go on this many X amount of Tinder dates by the end of the month, or lose this much weight or lift this much. An amazing feeling is not just outdoing that person no matter what level they're at, but also outdoing what they think you can't do. In some ways, it reminds me of the whole domination mentality that's explained in the one chapter of Grant Cardone's 10X Rule, my second favorite book ever. This man said that he is, not Grant Cardone, but David Goggins, said he's 43 and he has done 60 ultra races. And I heard about ultra races and I was like, what's an ultra race? The man has done 60 of them. I think the first one he did is what was considered the ultra race for ultra racers. So basically the hardest one. It's like he would always do the thing that is the hardest to do. It's like, in some ways it's almost funny how like insane and like irrational and of course inspiring it is. An ultra race is a marathon that's longer than 26 miles. The most common lengths are, I think, 31 miles, 62 miles, 80 miles, and 100 miles. Imagine running 100 miles. I think with no breaks. He ran 101 in 19 hours, his first ultra marathon. He did it with absolutely no training at all. It's like really hard to believe, but at the same time, like if you know his story and everything, it makes sense. He said that when you do something like that, and the way that he, or at least his ghostwriter, explains it also makes a lot of sense too. He said that when you do something like this and you are so undertrained, unless he were to get his brain and put it in someone else's head, would they ever know the amount of suffering that he was in? No one else on the planet so far has done 100 miles or more with absolutely no training. He said it changed his perspective on life. Like at mile 70, for example, he was peeing blood and he had diarrhea and he was still running. So some of the things that happened to him actually kind of sounded a little disgusting. And this is just one example of how or where his ghostwriter kind of shone for himself. I remember lying there naked with the shower pouring down upon me. I shivered and felt and looked like death, and then I started peeing again. But instead of blood or urine, what came out of me looked like thick brown bile. He didn't want to go to the hospital either because the hospital would give him painkillers to treat it, and he didn't want to mask the pain. Like, the reason this book is called Can't Hurt Me only kind of makes sense. What I think is cool about this book is that he bases the concepts around things in his life in multiple, like, avenues. Like his traumatic childhood and Hell Week, his Navy and Air Force experiences, and his ultramarathon runs. And he has so many extreme examples of, like, what's considered going beyond over the limit, where you're training your mind instead of your body. So instead of talking about a bunch of concepts he learned from experiences in one avenue like the military, for example, he talks about how experiences in multiple avenues revolve around one concept, which is like ignoring physical pain by embracing and almost finessing your emotional pain. For some odd reason, I underestimated this book, and I ended up liking it a lot more than I thought I would. I'm glad that I didn't end up finishing it thinking, well, that was just like a motivational spiel. Because it's like these nuggets of gold wrapped in like the vivid paper of storytelling. You know, in some ways it's like he and his ghostwriter kind of polished a turd and turned it into a diamond or something. And in some ways you wonder almost why he does all of this. He ignores pain by absorbing it in some ways, to the point where his body is literally breaking and decaying, and his flesh is literally physically just, you can see it's being exposed. I think mainly it's because his goal is to be the hardest person in the universe. I'm not sure exactly what that means, but it sounds like he's getting to that point if he's not already there. And it also kind of sounds like in some ways he's trying to prove something like that. Maybe that he can do it, or he can exceed that to himself. I mean, maybe you know about his childhood after reading the first couple chapters, but like, you wonder if all the different people who have childhoods like that, because, you know, let's face it, he's probably not the only one in the universe, despite him wanting to become the hardest person in the universe. It's just that, what's separating the way he's taking that in from those people, even if they end up living like kind of okay lives? He believes in the impossible, kind of like me, and probably hopefully you. And he also believes that we are kind of put here in order to achieve and exceed the target of the impossible. So despite how hard he tries to convince us to be on ourselves, like, It's actually very noble. When your sister's been getting tortured like this for years, you never know what's in a man's mind. The more you think about yourself when you're going through hell, the harder it's going to be. If your brain is in control and you want to control your brain, you will find more. Direction 1. I recommend this book if you think that you are not strong enough to take on the world. If you're trying to discipline yourself, challenge yourself so that ultimately you can find peace with yourself, this book is for you. Direction 2. An excellent book that this one reminded me of. If you like this one, check out Relentless by Tim Grover. Tim Grover, for those who don't know, is the guy who trained Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, and Dwayne Wade. His company is literally called Attack Athletics. So check that book out. Learn more about the dark side of yourself and how to use it so you can make yourself unstoppable to absolutely everything in the face of your path. Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. There's a link in the description if you guys want to check it out and read the reviews. That and all the other books that I mentioned in this video if you want to check those out too. If there are any other books that you guys want me to check out and review, please let me know in the comments below, and also let me know if you checked out this book and you liked it. But hey, make sure to smash that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, because people watch this far into my videos and they don't subscribe, and I don't know why that is, but if you have subscribed and you want to turn up just a notch and turn on that notification bell to receive a notification every time I drop a new video, that would mean the world to me. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. You can find me everywhere, and I will see you then.